A young girl vanished without a trace while riding her horse through the countryside on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. Her family searched desperately, but she and her beloved horse had simply disappeared into thin air. But 34 hours later, a wild Mustang herd appears near the search area, behaving strangely and leading park rangers deeper into the wilderness. What they discover at the end of that trail makes everyone's blood run cold and changes the entire investigation. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you're watching, because now I'm going to tell you how all of this happened. Emily Larson's laughter echoed across the schoolyard as she sat cross-legged on a bench, her blonde hair catching the October sunlight. The 14-year-old's eyes sparkled with excitement as she leaned toward her best friend Alyssa. "The fawn was born just last week," Emily explained, pulling out her sketchbook to show detailed drawings of a deer family. "I need to check if they're okay before the storm hits. They've made a little home near Miller's Creek." Alyssa nodded, familiar with Emily's deep connection to the wildlife surrounding Pinecrest, Montana. "Just be careful. My dad says that storm's coming in fast." The school bell rang, calling them back to afternoon classes. Emily tucked her sketchbook away, already planning her route through the eastern trails once she got home. At 3:45 that afternoon, Emily burst through the front door of the Larson family ranch, dropping her backpack on the kitchen counter. Her mother Karen looked up from chopping vegetables for dinner. "Homework first?" Karen asked, already knowing the answer. "I'll do it when I get back," Emily promised, racing upstairs to change. Minutes later, she returned wearing riding boots and her distinctive blue down vest, a birthday gift from her father John, who ran the local veterinary clinic. Karen frowned at the darkening sky visible through the kitchen window. "That storm's moving in faster than they predicted. Maybe wait until tomorrow?" "I'll be quick," Emily assured her, grabbing an apple and granola bar from the counter. "Just want to check on the deer family. Back for dinner, I promise." From the window, Karen watched her daughter dash across the yard to the stables, blonde ponytail bouncing beneath her riding helmet. Emily moved with confidence as she saddled Shadow, the black stallion that had been her companion since she was 10. Within minutes, horse and rider disappeared down the eastern trail, the last glimpse a flash of blue vest against the darkening tree line. By 6:30, Karen was setting the table, glancing repeatedly at the clock. Outside, the first raindrops began to fall. She tried Emily's cell phone again, frowning when it went straight to voicemail. "Max," she called to her 11-year-old son, who was absorbed in a video game. "Has your sister texted you?" Max shook his head without looking up. "Nope." At 6:45, Karen called John at the clinic. "She's probably just lost track of time," John reassured her, though his voice carried an edge of concern. "I'm finishing up with Mrs. Peterson's retriever. I'll drive along the eastern trails on my way home." The rain intensified, drumming against the roof as darkness fell completely. Karen paced the kitchen, dinner cooling on the stove, calling Emily's phone every few minutes. At 7:12, her own phone rang. "I found Shadow." John's voice was tight with fear. "He was wandering alone near Miller's Creek. The saddle's empty, Karen." Karen's hand flew to her mouth. "Her phone?" "Still in the saddlebag. I've already called Bill and Dave. They're heading out now. Call everyone you can." Within an hour, neighbors had formed a makeshift search party, voices calling Emily's name echoing through the increasingly heavy rain. Flashlight beams cut through darkness as they combed the familiar trails, hope diminishing with each passing minute. Sheriff Mike Donovan arrived with 2 deputies, maps spread across the Larsons' kitchen table as John traced Emily's usual routes with a shaking finger. "She knows these woods better than most adults," John insisted, his voice breaking. "She wouldn't just get lost." The sheriff nodded grimly. "We'll find her, John. Could be she fell and sought shelter. Smart kid like Emily knows not to wander in a storm." Outside, deputies examined the area where Shadow had been found. One called the sheriff over, pointing to disturbing marks in the mud. "Could be drag marks," the deputy said quietly. "Or could be from the horse itself, hard to tell with this rain." Sheriff Donovan's brow furrowed deeply. "Document everything. And let's keep this between us for now. No need to panic the parents until we know more. As midnight approached, the search continued despite the worsening conditions. Karen stood on the porch, peering into the darkness, jumping at every sound. Max sat silently at the window upstairs, clutching the teddy bear Emily had given him years ago. In the kitchen, Sheriff Donovan made a call to the state police. "We've got a 14-year-old girl missing in rough terrain during a severe storm. I need additional resources at first light, and notify the FBI. This is now officially a critical missing person case." While the tempest finally began to ease at dawn, revealing the destruction left in its wake, Sheriff Donovan received a call on his radio, and his face instantly hardened. The drag marks found near where Shadow was discovered weren't caused by the horse or wild animals. Preliminary analysis indicated signs of human intervention. Sheriff Donovan's expression darkened as he lowered the radio. "John, I need a word," he said quietly, guiding the distraught father away from the kitchen where volunteers were gathering. "What is it?" John asked, his voice hoarse from calling Emily's name through the night. "Those marks we found near where Shadow was discovered, forensics is saying they're not consistent with animal tracks or natural causes. We're treating this as a potential crime scene now." The first rays of dawn illuminated the Larson property as emergency vehicles arrived in a steady stream. Within hours, the family's barn had been transformed into a command center, with maps covering every available surface. Red pins marked areas already searched, while blue pins indicated planned search zones. By 9 in the morning, FBI agent Diana Winters stepped out of a black SUV, her crisp navy blazer standing out among the muddy search gear of local volunteers. She quickly introduced herself to Sheriff Donovan before requesting a private briefing on all evidence collected so far. In cases of missing minors in wilderness areas, the first 72 hours are critical, Agent Winters explained to the Larsons as she spread out detailed topographical maps. "I've requested K-9 units specialized in human tracking. They'll be here within the hour." Karen nodded numbly, her fingers tracing the plastic bag containing Emily's blue hair ribbon, provided for the dogs to establish her scent. Dark circles underlined her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. Outside, dog handlers prepared their Belgian Malinois and German Shepherds, letting them sniff Emily's riding helmet before leading them toward Miller's Creek, where Shadow had been found. The animals worked methodically, noses to the ground, handlers watching for the slightest change in behavior. By afternoon, news vans lined the main road leading to the Larson property. A young reporter stood at the edge of the driveway, her voice solemn as she addressed the camera. The search for 14-year-old Emily Larson enters its second day as authorities expand their efforts following the discovery of potential evidence. Inside the house, Max sat silently on Emily's bed, holding her journal without opening it. When Karen appeared in the doorway with a sandwich, he turned away. "Max, you need to eat something," she pleaded, receiving only silence in return. That evening, the tactical search teams returned muddy and dejected. The K-9 units had picked up Emily's scent near Miller's Creek, but lost it after following it for approximately half a mile. "It's as if she just vanished," one handler explained to Agent Winters. "The dogs were confused, circling the same area repeatedly. Never seen anything quite like it." On the third morning, as rain threatened again, a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging cameras circled overhead. "We have several heat signatures in Sector 7, the pilot radioed. "Likely deer or elk, but we'll mark them for ground teams to verify." By now, the physical toll on Karen had become evident. During an afternoon search along the eastern ridge, she suddenly collapsed, her face ashen. 2 volunteers rushed her to Pinecrest Medical Center, where doctors diagnosed severe dehydration and exhaustion. "You can't help Emily if you're hospitalized yourself," John told her that evening, his own face gaunt with worry. "Please rest." "How can I rest when our daughter is out there?" Karen whispered, tears streaming down her face. As the first week reached its end, Agent Winters and Sheriff Donovan sat alone in the command center late at night, reviewing all evidence collected. "We need to consider all possibilities," Winters said carefully, "including that this may not have been an accident." The sheriff nodded grimly. I've known the Larsons for 15 years. They're good people, but we need to follow every lead, no matter where it takes us. While Karen recovered in the hospital and the searches reached the end of their first week without concrete results, a forest ranger found something disturbing hidden under leaves and mud near a secondary trail, a small silver horse brooch that John confirmed with tears in his eyes to be the birthday present Emily had received 2 months earlier. But the location was almost 5 miles beyond the area where the searches were concentrated, in a direction Emily never traveled. "It's Emily's brooch, no doubt about it," John said, his voice breaking as he held the small silver horse in his trembling palm. "I gave it to her for her 14th birthday. She never takes it off." Agent Winters carefully placed the brooch in an evidence bag, her expression serious. "This completely changes our search parameters. We need to reconfigure all teams immediately." By noon, the command center was transformed. The worn dining table at the Larson home disappeared beneath new maps, the search area now marked with a vastly expanded perimeter. Red pins showing previously searched zones looked inadequate against the daunting expanse of wilderness now under consideration. "How could she have gotten this far?" Sheriff Donovan asked, tracing the 5-mile distance from where Shadow was found to the brooch's location. "Especially with that storm." Winters shook her head. "That's what we need to figure out." Forensic analysts worked meticulously with the brooch in a makeshift lab set up in the Larsons' garage. "By the oxidation and sediment accumulation, this has been here for several days," explained the lead technician, carefully scraping tiny samples for testing. Karen returned from the hospital that afternoon, stopping in the doorway of her own living room, momentarily disoriented by the transformation. Strangers in FBI windbreakers spoke into phones, laptops covered every surface, and the familiar family photos had been moved aside to make room for timeline charts of Emily's last known movements. "We found her brooch," John said quietly, guiding his wife to a chair. 5 miles north of where we've been searching." Karen's face paled further. "She never goes that way. The terrain is too rough." In the corner of the living room, Max sat cross-legged, methodically drawing in a sketchbook. The child hadn't spoken a word since Emily's disappearance, concerning both his parents and the child psychologist who had visited yesterday. "The mutism is selective, a response to trauma," Dr. Martinez had explained gently to John. "He hasn't chosen to stop speaking. His mind is protecting him." That evening, a tense meeting unfolded in the kitchen. Agent Winters spread out photographs and documents as the Larsons listened, their faces drawn with exhaustion. "We need to consider all scenarios," she said carefully. "From an accident with Emily becoming disoriented to—" she hesitated before continuing. "The possibility of abduction." John exploded, grabbing Sheriff Donovan by the arm and pulling him outside. "You're suggesting someone took my daughter? We know everyone in this town." "John, please," Donovan replied, his voice steady despite the confrontation. "Diana is doing her job. We have to look at every angle." As darkness fell, fewer volunteers returned to the command center than on previous days. The initial surge of community support was showing signs of fatigue as the search entered its 3rd week without success. In Emily's bedroom that night, Karen discovered her daughter's journal hidden beneath the mattress. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers tracing the leather cover, torn between respecting Emily's privacy and desperate for any clue that might help find her. With trembling hands, she finally opened it. Meanwhile, Agent Winters interviewed Emily's biology teacher, Mr. Collins, at the high school. She was particularly interested in that deer family, he recalled. Even asked to do a special observation project on them. As the community gathered in the school gymnasium the following evening, Sheriff Donovan stood before them, his expression grave. "We're transitioning from a rescue operation to a broader investigation," he explained carefully. "But this doesn't mean we're giving up." Late that night, after watching home videos of Emily laughing, riding Shadow, blowing out birthday candles, Karen finally collapsed into restless sleep. John found himself in the stable, seeking comfort beside Shadow, who had recovered physically from his ordeal, but remained unusually agitated. The horse suddenly whinnied and shifted nervously, as if sensing something in the darkness beyond the stable doors. During a routine interview with a retired forest ranger who had volunteered for the search, Agent Winters noticed something strange when he casually mentioned having seen the wild horses behaving oddly near Miller's Creek on the morning of the disappearance, information nobody had reported previously and which coincided precisely with the estimated time of Emily's disappearance. Agent Winters leaned forward, her attention suddenly razor-sharp. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that about the horses?" Frank Miller, the retired forest ranger, looked surprised at her sudden interest. "The wild Mustangs? Yeah, I noticed them acting strange that morning. I was checking fishing spots along Miller's Creek when I saw a group of them just standing there, watching the area. Unusual behavior. They normally avoid humans completely." "Why didn't you mention this before?" Winters asked, keeping her tone neutral despite her growing excitement. Miller shrugged. "Didn't seem important compared to finding the girl. Lots of wildlife in these parts." Within an hour, Winters had arranged a private meeting with Sheriff Donovan and the Larsons to discuss this new development. John paced the kitchen, visibly agitated. "We're wasting valuable time on stories about wild horses when we should be expanding the search area," he exploded, slamming his hand against the counter. Karen, who had been quietly examining her daughter's journal, looked up. "John, wait." She carefully turned the journal around, revealing detailed sketches of Mustangs with Emily's neat handwriting beside them. "Look at this entry from last month. They always appear after rain, always in groups of 5 or 6. The following morning, Dr. Sarah Henderson arrived at the command center. A wildlife biologist from Montana State University, she spread migration maps across the table. "The Mustangs shouldn't be in that region this time of year," she explained, pointing to seasonal patterns. "Their presence near Miller's Creek in October is highly unusual." While the adults discussed the Mustangs, Max sat cross-legged in the corner, meticulously drawing in his sketchbook. Dr. Martinez, his therapist, watched with interest as increasingly detailed images of black horses emerged on the page. "These drawings are remarkable," she commented quietly to Karen. "The level of detail suggests he's processing something significant." That afternoon, Agent Winters called a strategy meeting. "We need to consider all possibilities," she said, glancing at John apologetically. "Emily's connection with animals is well documented. Could she have followed the horses for some reason?" "That's absurd," John retorted. "My daughter wouldn't abandon her trail to follow wild horses into dangerous terrain." "John, please," Karen interjected, her voice strained with exhaustion. "We need to explore every possibility, no matter how unlikely it seems." Their disagreement escalated into the first serious argument since Emily's disappearance, their voices carrying through the house. "You're clutching at crazy theories because you can't accept that we might never find her," John shouted, instantly regretting his words when he saw Karen's stricken expression. From the doorway, Max watched silently, his eyes wide with distress. Later that evening, Dr. Henderson examined Max's drawings with growing interest. "He's depicting a specific herd formation," she explained to Agent Winters. "This protective circle pattern is something Mustangs only adopt in very specific circumstances, usually when they're guarding something valuable." Meanwhile, Winters worked late into the night, spreading photographs of 3 missing teenagers across her temporary desk. All had disappeared from neighboring counties within the past 5 years. All had connections to outdoor activities, and all cases remained unsolved. The next morning, one of the search teams radioed in with news. They'd discovered what appeared to be a temporary campsite in a remote area, with evidence that someone had recently spent the night there. As Karen sorted through Emily's belongings, searching for any overlooked clues, she paused at a book on animal communication filled with highlighted passages and margin notes in her daughter's handwriting. Sheriff Donovan called John that afternoon with difficult news. Due to resource limitations, the official search operation would be scaled back after 3 weeks. John's vehement protests were met with apologetic but firm explanations about jurisdictional realities and limited county resources. At sunset, Agent Winters stood with Dr. Henderson on a ridge overlooking the valley, watching a distant group of Mustangs at the forest's edge. "They appear to be waiting for something," the biologist murmured, her scientific detachment momentarily replaced by wonder. After 3 weeks of fruitless searches and with winter snow approaching, the investigation received an unexpected twist when a hunter called the hotline reporting he'd found a piece of blue fabric caught in bushes near the Blackwater Mountain region, more than 8 miles from Emily's last known location and in an area never included in the searches because it was considered inaccessible for a teenager on foot. The helicopter circled above the Blackwater Mountain region, its rotors slicing through the crisp autumn air as Agent Winters pressed her face against the window. Below, the rugged terrain stretched in endless waves of pine and stone, appearing almost impassable. "This area is practically impassable on foot, especially for a teenager," the pilot commented, banking the helicopter for another pass. "Even experienced hikers avoid these ridges." Yet the piece of blue fabric discovered by Hunter Garrett Wilson had electrified the investigation. Though forensics hadn't yet confirmed if it matched Emily's vest, its mere existence renewed hope that had begun to wane after 3 weeks of searching. On the ground, John Larson led a small group of determined volunteers through dense underbrush, marking trees with bright orange ribbons to create a search pattern. His face, now gaunt from weeks of sleepless nights, hardened with resolve as they reached the location where the fabric had been found. "We'll work in concentric circles from this point," he instructed, his voice carrying the authority of a man refusing to surrender to despair. Back at the forensics lab in Pinecrest, a technician carefully compared fibers from the discovered fabric with samples taken from Emily's remaining clothes, her brow furrowed as she adjusted the microscope. "The coloration is similar," she noted to her colleague, "but the composition—" She hesitated, adjusting the focus again. "It's not exactly the same." The news reached Karen as she underwent medical tests at Pinecrest General Hospital. Episodes of exhaustion had become more frequent, concerning Dr. Lewis enough to order a full workup. "Your body is responding to prolonged trauma," he explained gently, reviewing her charts. "The physical stress of sleep deprivation combined with emotional distress is overwhelming your system." Karen barely heard him, her attention fixed on the text from John about the fabric analysis. Another dead end. Another hope extinguished. Meanwhile, Agent Winters found herself in a tense standoff with several Blackwater region landowners in the sheriff's office. "I understand your privacy concerns," she said, maintaining professional composure despite her frustration, "but we're talking about a child's life. Those are private hunting grounds that have been in my family for generations," argued Harold Mackenzie, a silver-haired man in his 70s. "You can't just bring search parties trampling through there." At Pinecrest Elementary, Max sat alone during recess, separated from the other children by an invisible barrier of trauma. His teacher, Ms. Parker, watched with concern as he meticulously drew yet another scene featuring black horses near what appeared to be a small cabin. That afternoon, Dr. Henderson and her team of wildlife biologists installed automatic cameras at strategic points throughout the eastern boundaries of the Blackwater region. "If the Mustangs are moving through this area," she explained to a volunteer, "we'll document their patterns." Late that night, John sat at the kitchen table, maps spread before him, amber whiskey catching the light as he took another sip. Circles marked areas already searched, vast empty spaces representing terrain yet to be explored. His finger traced the edge of the Blackwater Mountains, mind calculating how much ground could be covered before the first serious snowfall. The investigation gained unexpected momentum when Agent Winters interviewed retired Forest Service worker Thomas Jenkins. "There are at least 6 undocumented emergency cabins in the Blackwater region," he revealed, sketching their approximate locations on her map. "Built in the 80s for researchers, but most folks have forgotten they exist." The first snowflakes of the season began falling the next morning, light and tentative, but carrying an unmistakable warning. Search teams moved with renewed urgency, aware that accessible terrain would soon disappear beneath winter's blanket. 2 months after Emily's disappearance, the Pinecrest community gathered in the school gymnasium for an awareness event. Photos of Emily surrounded by candles created a shrine-like atmosphere as Karen took the stage, her body thinner, but her eyes determined. "Today marks 2 months since Emily disappeared," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "We don't just ask for your prayers, we ask that you keep your eyes open, that you don't forget her." As technical analysts reviewed footage from the automatic cameras that evening, they noticed something unusual: groups of Mustangs moving in strange circular patterns near the Blackwater area, their behavior distinct from normal migratory movements. On the eve of the first major blizzard of the season, which would interrupt the searches for weeks, the operations center received an anonymous call. A disturbed male voice claimed to have information about Emily, mentioning "the horses that protect the chosen ones," before abruptly hanging up, and the call tracing revealed that the call came from a public phone just 2 blocks from the operations center. Sheriff Donovan burst through the command center doors, his face flushed with urgency. "We've traced the call. Public phone outside Murray's drugstore." Within minutes, Donovan and Agent Winters were reviewing grainy security footage from the store's exterior camera. A middle-aged man with an unkempt beard appeared on screen, nervously glancing around as he spoke into the payphone before hurrying away. "That's Marcus Jennings," Donovan said, freezing the frame. "Former Conservation Service employee, had some mental health episodes over the years." Outside the windows of the command center, Pinecrest disappeared beneath a relentless snowfall. 4 feet of accumulation transformed the town into a ghostly landscape of white mounds and narrow pathways carved between buildings. The search for Emily, already challenging, now became virtually impossible as winter seized the mountains with an iron grip. Agent Winters pored over Jennings' file in her temporary office. Multiple psychiatric hospitalizations punctuated his employment history, along with numerous reports detailing his claims of communication with wild animals. What had once seemed like the delusions of a troubled mind now took on new significance in light of Emily's disappearance. The following day, John Larson and Sheriff Donovan embarked on a grueling expedition through deep snow to Jennings' cabin on the outskirts of town. The small structure stood abandoned, its windows dark, but inside they discovered walls covered with photographs of Mustangs and hand-drawn maps of the Blackwater region marked with cryptic symbols. "What the hell was he doing out there?" John muttered, examining a map with locations circled in red that matched areas where search teams had reported unusual Mustang activity. At the Larson home, Karen carefully hung ornaments on a small Christmas tree in the living room. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped Emily's favorite decoration, a delicate crystal horse that caught the light in rainbow patterns. Silent tears tracked down her face as she placed it prominently on a front branch. Max opened his Christmas present early Christmas morning, a professional-grade colored pencil set from his parents. Without a word, he immediately began using them to create his most detailed drawing yet. Black Mustangs surrounding a snow-covered cabin nestled between pine trees, the blue sky above rendered with surprising skill for an 11-year-old. At her laboratory at Montana State University, Dr. Henderson analyzed data from the automatic cameras, her scientific detachment wavering as patterns emerged. "The same 6 Mustangs appear repeatedly," she explained to her assistant, pointing to distinctive markings, "always in the same circular pattern, always in these specific areas." Agent Winters interviewed Dr. Calvin Richards, the psychiatrist, who had treated Jennings during his most recent hospitalization. "Marcus isn't violent," Richards explained, "just obsessed. He genuinely believes certain animals choose people to protect. His delusions are remarkably consistent." During another sleepless night, John found himself examining Max's drawings spread across the dining room table. The cabin his son repeatedly depicted contained specific architectural details: a chimney positioned on the left side, a distinctive window configuration, even a small covered porch that seemed too precise to be imaginary. Karen discovered an old photo album in the attic while searching for more Christmas decorations. Flipping through images of her teenage years at summer conservation camps, she froze upon seeing a photograph of herself standing before a research cabin that bore an uncanny resemblance to the structure in Max's drawings. Dr. Henderson presented her findings to Agent Winters the following day. "There's no conventional scientific explanation for this behavior," she admitted, displaying migration charts and camera footage. "These Mustangs are clearly patrolling specific areas with intention." A virtual meeting between Winters, FBI behavioral analysts, and consulting biologists yielded cautious speculation. In extremely rare cases, noted wildlife expert Dr. James Peterson, animals demonstrate behaviors suggesting some kind of awareness of human situations. Though scientifically controversial, these accounts persist across cultures. That evening, John discovered a conservation service patch among Karen's old belongings. "You volunteered in Blackwater 20 years ago?" he asked, confronting her in the kitchen. "Why didn't you mention this during the investigation?" Karen's eyes welled with tears. "I barely remembered. It was so long ago. But now I realize those cabins where we worked, they were exactly in the areas where the Mustangs have been spotted." During a rare break in the snowstorms, a forest ranger managed to reach one of the automatic camera locations to replace batteries. Checking the captured images on his tablet, he suddenly stopped scrolling, his breath catching in his throat. Among dozens of photos showing Mustangs in the snow was one partially obscured image that appeared to show a human figure in a blue jacket moving between trees, the timestamp in the corner indicating it was taken 3 weeks after Emily's disappearance. Ranger Wilson's hands trembled as he zoomed in on the image. The blurry figure in blue was barely discernible among the trees, but unmistakably human. "Get this to Agent Winters immediately," he instructed, voice crackling through the radio. "And alert the Larsons." Within hours, the photograph had transformed the command center. Technicians hunched over computers, enhancing and analyzing the image pixel by pixel, while Agent Winters coordinated with meteorologists. "We have a 3-day window of stable weather predicted for next week," the meteorologist confirmed, pointing to satellite imagery. "Low temperatures but minimal precipitation. It's your best chance before February." Sheriff Donovan dispatched deputies to locate Marcus Jennings, eventually tracking him to a homeless shelter in neighboring Millerton. When approached, Jennings bolted through the kitchen, knocking over chairs before deputies cornered him in the alley behind the building. In the interview room at the sheriff's station, Agent Winters carefully placed a cup of hot coffee before Jennings, whose weathered hands shook slightly as he reached for it. "The horses know where she is," he muttered, gaze darting between Winters and Donovan. "They always know. They protect the ones with the gift." His lucidity fluctuated throughout the interview, moments of startling clarity punctuated by rambling tangents about animal consciousness. At the Larson home, Karen climbed into the attic, determination outweighing exhaustion as she pulled dusty boxes from corners. Hours passed as she sifted through remnants of her past until she discovered a worn notebook with Blackwater Conservation Project 2003 emblazoned on its cover. "John," she called downstairs, voice trembling with excitement, "I found something." Together they spread Karen's old notebook across the kitchen table, discovering hand-drawn maps of emergency cabins throughout the Blackwater region. Several were marked with symbols that Karen explained indicated permanent supply caches. These cabins were stocked with emergency rations, first aid supplies, even communication equipment, she explained, fingers tracing the faded lines. They were meant to last for months if necessary. Max, who had been silently observing from the doorway, suddenly stepped forward and pointed to a specific location on one map. "It's this one. Emily is here." His voice, unused for months, sounded raspy but certain. Karen and John exchanged shocked glances, momentarily speechless at hearing their son speak again. Dr. Henderson arrived that evening, comparing Karen's old maps with Mustang movement patterns documented by the automatic cameras. "The horses are circling precisely these 3 cabins," she observed, marking coordinates. It's almost as if they're standing guard. As news spread of the compelling new evidence, specialized alpine rescue experts arrived from Colorado, bringing advanced snow equipment and custom vehicles designed for mountain rescue. Their leader, Sam Blackwell, had successfully located missing hikers in conditions far worse than Pinecrest was experiencing. If she found shelter in one of these cabins, and if there were emergency supplies intact, there's a real possibility she's alive, Blackwell explained during a strategy session. People have survived longer in worse conditions. John insisted on joining the expedition, despite medical concerns about his own exhaustion. "I'm going," he stated flatly, when Agent Winters expressed reservations. No discussion. While rescue preparations continued, Karen organized supplies for Emily's potential recovery: thermal clothing, high-calorie foods, and basic medical equipment. Her movements were methodical, purposeful, hope rekindled, but tempered by the knowledge that disappointment might lie ahead. The night before the expedition, hundreds of Pinecrest residents gathered in the town square for a candlelight vigil. Many who had abandoned the search months earlier returned, offering support and prayers for Emily's safe return. Later that night, John and Karen lay together on Emily's bed, arms wrapped around each other for the first time in months. "If she's there," John whispered into the darkness. "When she's there," Karen corrected gently. "We're bringing her home." At dawn, the rescue team departed in a convoy of specialized vehicles, loaded with equipment and supplies for multiple contingencies. A medical evacuation helicopter remained on standby in Missoula, pilot monitoring weather conditions hourly. The expedition faced brutal conditions in the Blackwater Mountains, but when they finally reached the first target cabin, they found unmistakable signs of recent occupation: still warm ashes in an improvised fireplace, and, most incredibly, a group of Mustangs standing like sentinels just yards from the structure, who didn't flee as humans approached, but simply watched, as if they had been waiting. Sam Blackwell crouched beside the still warm ashes in the fireplace, his gloved fingers carefully sifting through the remnants. "Someone's been here recently," he confirmed, looking up at John, whose eyes were scanning every inch of the small cabin. "Very recently." The interior revealed more signs of habitation: a makeshift bed of pine boughs in the corner, empty cans neatly stacked by the door, and a rough-hewn cup carved from wood. John's heart pounded as he spotted a thin blue cord tied around a bundle of kindling. "This is from Emily's vest," he whispered, fingers trembling as he carefully untied it. "She uses these drawstrings to adjust the hood." Outside, the rescue team stood in uneasy silence, watching the Mustangs that remained positioned like sentinels, approximately 50 yards from the cabin. The horses' behavior defied explanation. Wild animals typically fled human presence, yet these remained, occasionally stamping hooves or tossing their heads. "They're moving," Sam observed, as the lead horse, a powerful black stallion, took several deliberate steps in a northeastern direction before stopping to look back at the humans. "It's almost like they want us to follow them," Ranger Wilson finished, the words sounding absurd even as he spoke them. Sam consulted his GPS and maps. "The next cabin is 3 kilometers in that direction," he said, pointing toward where the horses were heading. "Exactly where they're going." The team quickly gathered their gear, determination renewed by the evidence of Emily's survival. As they prepared to move out, an unexpected snowstorm descended, visibility dropping to mere feet in front of them. "Rope up," Sam ordered, uncoiling a length of climbing rope. "Everyone maintains physical contact with the person ahead. No exceptions." Back in Pinecrest, Karen sat rigid beside the radio transmitter, flinching at each burst of static. Agent Winters watched her with concern, knowing that each moment of communication silence increased the woman's anxiety tenfold. "Base, this is Alpha Team," came Sam's voice, broken by interference. "Moving to second location. Confirmed signs of recent habitation at Cabin 1, conditions deteriorating." In his bedroom, Max worked feverishly, colored pencils flying across paper. His drawings had evolved from simple sketches to detailed scenes, horses, cabins, and a small figure clearly representing Emily. Dr. Martinez observed silently from the doorway, recognizing that the boy was processing trauma through art in ways words could not express. The rescue team battled through thickening snow, following a narrow ridge that dropped steeply on both sides. Visibility had decreased to the point where team members could barely see the person ahead of them, despite being connected by rope. "Hold position," Sam called suddenly, raising his hand. Through swirling snow, the Mustangs had reappeared, standing at what appeared to be a natural gap between towering rock formations. "That's not on our maps." "It's a pass," Ranger Wilson confirmed after consulting his GPS. "Cuts the distance to the next cabin almost in half." The narrow passage forced them to proceed single file, walls of stone rising on either side, protecting them somewhat from the driving snow. John's thoughts raced with each step. Was Emily alive? Had she somehow survived months in this wilderness? The evidence suggested an impossible truth he was afraid to fully embrace. At the operations center, Agent Winters monitored weather reports while coordinating with the medical evacuation team. "We need that helicopter ready the moment we have a weather window," she instructed, studying satellite imagery of the storm system. 4 hours into their trek, the team emerged from the pass onto a plateau. As the snow temporarily thinned, Sam pointed ahead. "There it is." The second cabin appeared empty at first glance, but closer inspection revealed fresh tracks around the perimeter and broken branches that had recently been used to clear snow from the entrance. "She's been moving between them," John realized, hope surging through his exhaustion, using different cabins for resources or safety. The radio crackled with static. "Base, this is Alpha Team. We're following to the third location. Conditions deteriorating. Request standby for medical evacuation if weather window opens." As darkness approached, the team pushed forward, guided occasionally by glimpses of the Mustangs that seemed to materialize and vanish in the swirling snow. Their presence had ceased to seem strange and had become instead a bizarre comfort, a constant in the disorienting whiteness. Finally, they crested a ridge and saw it. The third cabin, almost completely buried in snow with only its roof and small chimney visible. Thin smoke curled from the chimney, dissipating in the wind. The team members froze in their tracks as they approached close enough to see through a partially visible window, a small, fragile figure moving slowly inside the cabin. John fell to his knees in the snow when he recognized the unmistakable movement of his daughter. The rescue team burst through the frozen door with frantic energy, snow billowing in behind them as John rushed toward the small figure huddled near a dying fire. Emily Larson, barely recognizable beneath layers of makeshift clothing and a gaunt face, looked up with eyes that seemed too large for her face. Recognition dawned slowly, her chapped lips parting in disbelief. "Dad?" The word emerged as a raspy whisper before her eyes filled with tears. "You found me." Outside, the black Mustang stallion reared back on his hind legs and released a powerful whinny that echoed through the mountains, as though announcing that his mission was complete. Inside the cabin, the medical team worked with practiced efficiency. Dr. Rachel Carter, the expedition's physician, quickly assessed Emily's condition. "Severe malnutrition, chronic hypothermia, possible pneumonia," she reported, inserting an IV line with warmed fluids into Emily's paper-thin arm. "We need to stabilize her before attempting transport." Emily drifted in and out of consciousness as the team wrapped her in specialized thermal blankets. During a moment of clarity, she gripped John's hand with surprising strength. "Dad, I knew you would come." John could only nod through his tears, afraid that if he spoke, he might shatter completely. His daughter, alive after nearly 7 months in this frozen wilderness, looked like a fragile ghost of herself, her once healthy frame now skeletal, her fingertips showing signs of frostbite damage. Sam worked the radio, fighting for signal through the storm. "Base, we confirm. Repeat, Emily Larson found alive. Condition stable but critical. Request immediate medical evacuation." At the command center in Pinecrest, Karen collapsed into a chair when Agent Winters delivered the news, her body racked with sobs. "She's alive," she whispered over and over as the agent embraced her, both women overcome with emotion. Max ran through the house, his voice echoing through rooms that had been silent for months. "She's alive! She's alive!" he shouted, his selective mutism broken by the overwhelming joy of his sister's recovery. Back in the cabin, Emily struggled to communicate during brief moments of lucidity. "Shadow," she murmured, clutching the paramedic's sleeve. "He found his way to me. And the other horses. They showed me where to find food." Dr. Carter consulted with the helicopter pilot over the crackling radio. "We have a 20-minute window in approximately 2 hours. We need the patient at the extraction point by then." The team improvised a stabilizing stretcher, securing Emily's frail body for the treacherous 3-kilometer journey to the only viable helicopter landing zone. The storm had temporarily abated, but the mountainside remained treacherous with hidden crevasses and unstable snow. Each team member took turns carrying the stretcher, navigating the difficult terrain with extreme caution. John refused to leave his daughter's side, holding her hand whenever the trail allowed. Occasionally, Emily would open her eyes and murmur fragments of her ordeal. "I followed the birds during the day, counted stars at night, talked to Shadow, so I wouldn't forget my voice." After an exhausting 2-hour journey, they reached the extraction point as the distant thumping of helicopter rotors approached. The team worked quickly to prepare the landing zone, setting flares in a circle and using tarps to mark the area against the endless white landscape. The medical helicopter descended through swirling snow, the downdraft creating a momentary blizzard around them. Additional paramedics jumped out, moving efficiently to transfer Emily to the aircraft's sophisticated medical equipment. As they carried Emily toward the helicopter, her eyes suddenly focused on something beyond the clearing. The Mustangs stood at the tree line, the black stallion at their center, watching the proceedings as if ensuring the completion of their mysterious guardianship. While the helicopter lifted off toward Missoula Regional Medical Center, Emily gripped her father's hand with surprising strength and whispered, "I need to tell you about the cabins, about Marcus. He was there, at the beginning," before losing consciousness again, leaving John with the disturbing impression that there was more to his daughter's survival story than a simple accident, and that the mysterious Marcus Jennings may have had an as-yet unrevealed role in Emily's disappearance. John's mind raced with questions as the helicopter soared toward Missoula Regional Medical Center. Emily's words about Marcus Jennings haunted him, suggesting a complexity to her disappearance that went beyond a simple riding accident. At the hospital, a team of specialists awaited their arrival. Dr. Catherine Morgan, the lead physician, directed Emily's transfer from helicopter to trauma unit with practiced efficiency. Severe malnutrition, hypothermia damage, improperly healed fracture to the right ankle, she catalogued, examining Emily's frail form. "She's remarkably stable considering the circumstances." Karen arrived 2 hours later, having been flown in by Sheriff Donovan. She rushed to Emily's bedside, tears streaming down her face as she gently touched her daughter's gaunt cheeks. "I thought I'd never see these eyes again," she whispered, stroking Emily's tangled blonde hair. Throughout that first night, Emily drifted between consciousness and sleep. During lucid moments, she began sharing fragments of her extraordinary journey. "Shadow got spooked by lightning," she explained, her voice weak but determined. "I fell, couldn't walk. The storm was getting worse." The following day, with her strength gradually returning, Emily described crawling through the forest with her broken ankle, the rain pounding mercilessly around her. "Then I saw them, the Mustangs. They kept circling back whenever I stopped moving. It sounds crazy, but they led me to the first cabin before the worst of the storm hit." Agent Winters, meanwhile, continued her investigation into Marcus Jennings. In a small interview room at the Pinecrest Sheriff's Office, Jennings now spoke freely. "I built those cabins, kept stocking them with emergency supplies even after the program ended. Always felt someone would need them someday." 3 days after her rescue, Emily described Shadow's unexpected appearance. "He just showed up one day, weeks after I fell, standing outside the cabin, whinnying. I don't know how he found me, but he stayed. I used my belt and vest to make a tether so he wouldn't wander too far. Dr. Morgan discussed Emily's prognosis with her parents in the hospital conference room. She'll need surgery to reset the ankle properly. There's some permanent damage from frostbite to her extremities, but with physical therapy, she should regain substantial mobility. Max's reunion with his sister transformed him. The moment he entered her hospital room, he burst into animated speech, showing her his drawings and explaining how he'd known where to find her. "The horses told me," he said simply, leaving the adults exchanging uncertain glances. 1 week after Emily's rescue, Agent Winters officially closed the investigation. "All evidence confirms this was an accident followed by an extraordinary survival story," she explained to the Larsons. Emily's wilderness skills and remarkable determination, combined with the shelter and supplies in those conservation cabins, created the conditions for a survival that defies medical explanation. Emily continued sharing details of her months alone as her strength returned. "After the emergency supplies ran low, I watched the animals, where birds found seeds, where squirrels stored nuts. I learned to set simple snares from a survival book in the cabin. I rationed everything, measured daylight by shadows on the wall." Dr. Henderson visited frequently, fascinated by Emily's descriptions of the Mustang's behavior. "What you describe challenges conventional scientific explanations," she admitted, "but there are documented cases of animals exhibiting extraordinary altruistic behaviors toward humans." 3 months later, Emily worked through another grueling physical therapy session, determination etched on her face despite the pain. Her limp would be permanent, but her strength grew daily. "Push through," her therapist encouraged, as Emily completed another lap around the rehabilitation center. The Pinecrest community organized a celebration when Emily returned home permanently. Hundreds gathered in the town square, many wearing blue ribbons symbolizing her miracle survival. Emily, standing with a slight but noticeable limp, addressed the crowd. "I survived because of what my family taught me about respecting nature and finding strength in desperate moments." 6 months after her rescue, Emily sat on the Larson family porch, writing in a new journal while watching the sunset over the Blackwater Mountains. Shadow suddenly whinnied and turned his attention to the forest edge. There, barely visible among the twilight shadows, the wild black stallion that had led her rescue briefly appeared, as if checking on her welfare one last time, before silently disappearing into the forest, leaving Emily with a serene smile and the certainty that some connections transcend human understanding, but are nevertheless profoundly real.